How can we check and see if the sound's going out on the streaming? Apparently it wasn't.
I think they're working on that currently.
Yes, we're good. Okay. You gave everybody a stack of papers. Just real quickly, just explain to council. They can review them later, but what is this?
Yes. So it's looks like a large packet, but it's because of some of the sections are entire sections, such as the revenue and expense summary. And that's because we made a few adjustments here and there throughout the budget. So we wanted to update that to make sure the numbers are accurate. Also, the entire ordinance. And then you have a summary page that details some of the individual pages that changed. So I'm not going to go through each one of those, but those are to correct things like typos, to remove lines that are all zeros. And then we had just a few adjustments that didn't make it into the book the first time around. The Department of Innovation, Delivery, and Performance was missing some expense line items that just got missed when we did the first budget book. So those are examples of what changed. Nothing very significant. There's no change in the total budget. It's just correcting a few errors that we found. So this summary details all of the page changes, and the entire capital budget section was replaced just for continuity of the document. The ordinance was changed for continuity of the document. Even though we only made some changes, we print the whole thing over again, same as the overview. So that's why there's so many pages.
Thank you, Brent. I think probably you need to give notice to Public Works, Parks and Outdoors, and City Planning, because I think we'll probably cover that today. Councilwoman Coonrod isn't here, so we're not going to cover anything without her. But we may go on to equity and community engagement. I just don't know how fast we're going to go. All right. Under general government, you flagged two things. You flagged the judges, city court, and Councilman Henderson. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. How do I do?
Please, for some reason, it says our queue is currently this one.
Try now.
See if it's okay now. Where are you?
Top center button select.
Now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council, you'll find at your desk, I have submitted for your consideration an ordinance that would eliminate Division 2 of the Chattanooga City Courts. I think given the budget considerations this year, along with the fact that the judge for Division 2 has announced his retirement, I think it would be a good time for us to look at eliminating the second division of the court, which I think would save us about $500,000 a year. Now, understanding that we would have to continue to fund the court through either the vacancy of the judge or through the end of the current term, which is August the 31st, 2022. But I thought it would at least get on record where we stand with eliminating Division 2 so that for future considerations and budget considerations, we could deal with it at the appropriate time. So I guess if there's any questions, you'll find the ordinance at your desk. And I would at some point, and I guess maybe we need to put this in a committee, the legislative committee, to be heard and then get on the agenda.
Thank you. How do you see this having any implication for this year's budget?
No, ma'am, it would not have any effect on this year's budget. We would have to continue. It's my understanding, through talking with the city attorney and others, that we would have to fund the second division either through a vacancy or at the end of the current term.
Okay.
So
So
it would
right,
not have any effect on the current year's budget. It would be on the 2023 year budget.
okay, so it's a look forward and they'll go through the normal process, as you said.
That's correct. But
Okay.
I thought it would be a good time to go ahead and address it following the announcement of the retirement of Judge Bean.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ken, I'm going to need your help here. I see the city attorney just here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. City attorney.
Ready to turn this on? But also the election cycle is beginning and candidates can pull papers in December. It's not a budgetary urgency as much as a something we need to settle before candidates start running.
Sure. It's a
Thanks.
consideration of candidates.
Certainly. Thank you.
Good idea. Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions before we move on? Yes, Councilman Byrd.
Seeing people now start to pick up posts that they are running for this position. I just want to make sure that although we're doing this, it doesn't then start a lawsuit, start some type of issue.
Go ahead.
Sure. The council holds the power to create and end divisions of city court.
Okay.
It is very clearly within the council's purview. So I am not aware of any quasi-contractual right or vested property interest that anybody would have. I see no liability for the city because the council is acting well within its stated authority.
Gotcha. All right.
Hard to figure out what's going on, but
All right, thanks so much. And then if this was to go through at this point, do we notify the election commission and people of that nature too? So just so that people will be, do we have to give notice to people any type of way that this is going on? Or is this the notice?
this is the notice, the posted agenda, the vote, the input sessions, that's all sufficient for notice purposes. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
You good, Councilman?
Perfect.
Anything else? The next area that you gave notice on was agencies. And I guess the first question across the board I'll ask, and then I know Councilman Henderson had some questions as well. How did you select the agencies that you selected?
Yes, ma'am. So when Mayor Kelly came into office, April 19th, we immediately started reviewing the budget that was prepared by the prior administration and looking for potential adjustments, cuts, those sorts of things. When we reviewed the agency appropriations, we wanted to make sure that we were eliminating anything that was obviously duplication of services, anything that didn't align with the values and the priorities for the Mayor Kelly had for the budget and for his term. So we did make several cuts throughout the budget. We also talked to some of the agencies about the work they're currently doing and how they could realign the work that they're doing or make it a better return on investment. So as an example, we had multiple conversations with Donna McConico at Signal Centers about Baby University, which they will be changing the name for that program. They're going to try to realign how they do the program, integrate it more into community centers. And we're going to attempt to increase the return on investment by serving the same number of people, but reducing the funding by $150,000. So some of it was conversations with agencies like this. Some of it was just eliminating appropriations that we didn't feel needed to be made from a government entity, or the services just weren't aligned with what we're doing. So, and I can go through some of the very specific ones if you want, but generally that was the philosophy as we came into taking a budget from the prior administration, making adjustments and moving forward.
When we give people money, agencies money, do they have instructions there it's to be used for targeted community needs that we've identified as community needs? And I'm going back to the community input we got in January. And, we had community meetings, we got community input. So do they understand that the money they're getting isn't because they exist, it's because it's to use for targeted needs identified by the city?
Yes, ma'am. They should understand, and we will make sure to reiterate this point when we start distributing funds. There are, through the BFO process that existed with the prior administration, the needs were identified by the city council, by the mayor's office. We got responses, and there were decisions made from teams within the administration to determine funding. And so we used that, we kept the integrity of that process, because that was the community input and the process that was used before Mayor Kelly was elected. Going forward, I think going into next year's budget process, you will see a more robust community engagement process, a more robust engagement of agencies to determine, if we need to be sending money to agencies, or if we need to be doing something in-house, or sending things to different agencies. And it's all going to be based on a demonstrated need for the community and making sure that we have very targeted investments. So one example I can say from this budget, we increased the funding for the community kitchen by $70,000 compared to prior year. There's a demonstrated need. They have a very specific purpose in what they're doing with those funds. We all know that we have an increase in our homeless population, and therefore there is a demonstrated need that we don't want to necessarily do as a government, but we do want to make sure we have an agency in place that can, provide these types of services. So that's just one example in this year's budget where we have an increase to an agency for a very specific demonstrated need.
One last question, and then Councilman Henderson. You mentioned community input. There were two different community inputs. One was the one run by the administration, put before the council, and the council said, no, we think that's incorrect. And so we did our own. And that's where some of the discussion went. I hope that you're basing council from their own communities said they needed. I have that if you've not seen it. It was a little different.
Yes,
I think-
ma'am. I remember watching some of that during the
Okay.
mayoral campaign.
I remember particularly in District 4, Councilman Ledford, the main need was certainly not the main need. So, okay, thank you very much. Councilman Henderson. And this is where I'm not,
Just push next. There you go.
yeah, I did. Okay.
Hey, Chief, a couple of questions I have under agencies, and y'all can just get back with me, but I noticed, and I couldn't tell by looking back under our parks and outdoors. We've eliminated or cut 20,000 from the Chattanooga Zoo. And my budget numbers, I don't have a budget FY21 when I look at parks and outdoors parks outdoors. It just shows a total amount of 613,000. what was the reason for cutting the 20,000 out? Have we transferred that or?
This is a perfect question for at this moment, because you will find in your replacement pages that we presented this morning that there was an error on the zoo amount. So you will see in the new page that the appropriation for the amount for the zoo lease is $750,000, which is going to be an increase of 75,000 over prior year. One thing we did was we cut the $20,000 appropriation because we didn't think it made any sense to have this separate lease agreement over here that we've given money to the zoo for years and years and years to manage, all those assets. And then we had this little $20,000 appropriation also to the zoo that went through the agency request. So what we did was we decreased the agency request 20,000. We were already increasing their lease agreement, and we included that $20,000. So they'll provide those same services that they were providing with the $20,000, but it's now included in the contract that we will have with the zoo.
Okay.
So on your replacement page, you will see $750,000 for the zoo, and last year was $675,000.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Under the signal centers, Baby University, I would like a breakdown of maybe the last 2 or 3 years of what we have funded Baby University, a breakdown of how many people we have served, not services rendered, but just how many individual people we have serviced. And then do we have any idea of whether the people that we actually rendered services to are residents of the city of Chattanooga? Is there a way to require that they are city of Chattanooga residents?
Yes, I'm sure we could require that.
Okay. And then, and I guess, we talk a lot about impact. If it's possible, I'd like to see somehow some numbers of what kind of impact. And I don't just mean little glossy pages, but what impact for the amount of money that we are contributing towards this are we receiving? The other thing is this, and I've said this in prior years, and I don't know if we need to actually put it in the council hands or if this is something the administration can develop a policy around. I don't really understand why agencies don't have to partner when they come present their budget needs. It looks like to me there would be a greater impact if agencies came as partners or collectively as opposed to individuals. One thing I noticed several years back serving on the mayor's council to eliminate homeless vets, it seems like a lot of these agencies operate in silos and they're concerned about their little bowl of rice. And I understand that because they're all competing for their bowl of rice. But I think we could become more effective if we begin to collaborate and some of these partners or some of these agencies come in partnership and try to further impact the money that we're giving them so that we can address the whole need and instead of just a partial need. Is that something that the administration can develop a policy around, or does the council need to take action to do that?
So yes, certainly. And I remember, I don't know, 6 years ago, we did add that step to the agency application process where they had to have a departmental sponsor. Well, a departmental sponsor is different than a departmental partner, right? So I think as we move forward, what you will see is an entirely different process for requesting proposals essentially from all agencies in partnership with the city department and in alignment with exactly what our strategic framework lays out. And, I think I agree with you. I think we've come to a point in time when it doesn't need to be an expectation that the city just gives money to nonprofits in Chattanooga. We need to create an expectation that we are providing dollars to nonprofits to provide vital services to the citizens of Chattanooga, because it makes more sense for them to provide these services than for us to provide it ourselves. And we are very committed to doing this as we move through the budget process for fiscal year 23.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you want to hear any, would you like Joe to speak briefly about Baby University, or do you want to wait until
Let's
we
wait
have
on
actual
that.
numbers?
Let's wait on that because Councilwoman Hill is going to be, I believe does that fall under her bailiwick?
It could. It's related to early learning. Yes.
Unless you want,
I don't have to have it now. I mean, if they could collect the data.
if you all could, you do want it now? No. All right,
We'll
so
create a report.
I think, so there are some areas where council wants to do a deeper dive, and I'm thinking it may be in that area and give you time to collect. Is that
We'll
good?
prepare a small, minimal report based on the information Chairman Henderson asked for.
Okay. There's been a lot of interest about the agencies, as you know. And these are taxpayer dollars. And I think what you just said was really good. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what you said, Brent, about an agency partnering with the department, but my understanding of what Chairman Henderson was pointing out was getting these agencies to partner with each other to do the work versus individual appropriations. Am I understanding you correctly? So perhaps we have two levels of connectivity there of let's work really smartly with what the city rendered alongside what these agencies provide. But more than that, and you all have eliminated some redundancy, but when we have several different groups that are really all servicing youth, for example, or all servicing the elderly or people that are in poverty, how might we as a city or we as a city council encourage, incentivize people to work smarter together instead of, to use your term, everybody getting their own little bowl of rice? Let's make stir fry.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, we want to also not only have partnerships with city departments, but start having agencies partner with each other. You'll see this as we roll out some of our homelessness strategy. I think you'll see it in the especially as we look at ARP dollars and how to use that toward homelessness. You'll notice that we have an agency reduction in here for the Chattanooga Homeless Coalition, and that's because we plan to move that as well as some other joint funding into the ARP dollars bucket, because we think that's an appropriate use of those funds, but also it gives us an opportunity to go through a different process and how we allocate these funds. I think we've started this over the past couple of years as well through the Family Justice Center, that they are assembling partners that are working together to provide services. And I think we will see more of that and an expansion of that as we work to build out the campus in Midtown to provide services that are all coordinated and geared toward helping people as efficiently as possible.
You good, Councilwoman? Is there anything else relative to the agencies? Okay. That is all I have under general government that you all said you wanted to talk more about. So let's move on down to the next area you wanted to talk about. And it was a limited area, and that's fire and police. The main thing you were interested in was pay, and I believe that Chief Goldberg covered that. Was there anything else, Councilman? You may want to hit your thing so your mic's on. I do have Rakita's request about the mobile crisis response team. Was there anything else you had before I turn it over to her? Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Dolly.
Yes, ma'am.
Hit your button. All right, you're
Okay.
active. Thank you.
All right, just more information about the mobile crisis response team and how will it impact our city.
Yes, ma'am. For that, I will turn it over to Joda Tongnamnua.
Hello, Councilwoman. How are y'all doing today? I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but I'm also happy to give a broader overview of our proposal here and what we're intending on doing with the program, if that pleases the council. Great. So we are modeling our crisis response team after several models that we've seen across the country. And we are also building off of some success the city has had before. So the city has actually piloted a co-response model with the Chattanooga Fire Department called CFD Connects with the UTC Masters of Social Work students. And it's been tremendously successful. We've seen for a relatively small amount of money that we've been able to significantly decrease the number of 554 calls, which are typically whenever somebody falls or is looking for somebody to help them get access. We had calls ranging from folks looking to, they couldn't reach the remote and they've fallen. And so if they don't have anybody in their life, they call the fire department or they call 911, the fire department shows up. So we have begun to send social workers along with first responders, and that has led to active case management and referrals to adult protective services, referrals to social service agencies. It's been extremely successful. So this is intended to build off of this co-response model by embedding experienced social workers, not master's students, but people who have been in this field for some time, to respond to certain kinds of Chattanooga Police Department and Chattanooga Fire Department calls, with a particular focus on folks experiencing homelessness and those who experience mental crisis or duress, to connect them with resources, supports, and case management, rather than just ending that contact with a police officer and then an arrest. This program consists of 10 social workers and 1 program director, and will be housed in our Office of Community Health in the mayor's office. And this is, again, based off several successful models that we've seen. One in particular is the CAHOOTS model. It's been around for 31 years since 31 years since 1989. And the team that deals with, or 30 years rather, the team that deals with a wide range of mental health related crises, including conflict resolution, welfare checks, substance abuse, and more. And what's particularly interesting about this program is that in the cities where these programs have been deployed, Eugene, Oregon, Houston, Texas, and others, they not only provide an alternative pathway to a police interaction that could result in an arrest whenever maybe a police officer isn't the best equipped to handle it, but they actually also save the city money. So in Eugene, Oregon, the program budget is about $2.1 million annually, whereas the police department budget is around $90 million. And the co-response teams actually responded to a whopping 17% of calls that came into the 911 center, and actually were able to divert a significant amount of resources away from having to go to the police department and or be used by the police department, and save the city $8.5 million over the course of the last year. The crisis call diversion program in Houston, Texas, diverted between 30 and 50% of police calls and saved the city $1.3 million. And last year, in terms of public safety, I'm sure that's one question that you guys are thinking for these social workers. They've identified a very specific range of calls that we know that they could send a social worker to safely. So out of 24,000 calls that were diverted to the CAHOOTS team, the police backup was only requested in 150. Now, in our program, we would actually begin with a co-response model where a police officer would be going alongside a social worker until we could learn a little bit better about what call types could really be responded to purely by a social worker, which are best served by both of them together, and then which only requires a police response. So we know that it's essential to keep for the success of the program to include the community in the program design. So this is just the beginning, and we intend on holding a number of community sessions to better understand what kinds of community needs need to be served by social workers, and what kinds of services need to be offered through this alternative pathway. So that's a broad overview of our intention, and we're really excited about the possibility of piloting this program here in the city.
Are you good, Councilwoman?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much.
Okay. Councilman Burt. Do you have your mic on? I don't.
Yes, okay. A lot of people think if you build it, they will come. And I remember, I think like a year ago, when me and Councilwoman Coonrod was hearing about this about a year or two ago. It was like, we can't find the social workers because they don't want to go. They don't want to be out there, and they're like, hey, I understand you sitting in the office with me, but I don't want to be a part of that. And it was just hard finding social workers. How's that looking?
Yeah, so I think that's going to be one thing that we're going to have to really make sure we cover in training and recruitment. But one of the things that we have been successful with is in our program with CFD Connects is that we've had a fairly successful run at this. And so we do know that social workers are excited and prepared and ready to do this work. And we are intending on leaning on some best practices from Eugene, Oregon, and some of the places where this has been successful to make sure that, one, we can recruit and retain social workers to do the work, but then also that we're keeping them safe at the same time, which is why I think we're by beginning the co-response model and slowly expanding the range of calls. So we're not, just throwing all call types at 911 gets at them, but really a specific range, that might be trespassing where the individual might be homeless, and we want to make sure that they get connected to services, certain kinds of mental crises or duress calls, certain kinds of levels of intoxication that may not be best diverted to a jail, but to some sort of service or case management. We feel like we can clearly define that list of calls so our employees feel that they're safe, but they also have the training to deal with and de-escalate situations.
All right, thank you, Joe.
You good? Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Joda, I'm a feeling that we're building off of Captain Phillips' efforts. This is what it sounds
That's correct.
like. Okay, very good. And as we move into redefining some roles of our police department and its reassignment, what do you think, how far are we going to go? I mean, I'm envisioning a domestic call, and I'm thinking, who's going to want to go on that call?
Yeah, I think
And
these are.
how far are we willing to go, or do we know that yet?
I don't think we do know that yet, but just based on some best practices and internal discussion with folks working on this program and policy surrounding alternative response. A domestic violence call is a really good example of something where we would send a police officer. Those calls have a tendency to go sideways from time to time, and that's a situation that can escalate really quickly. And so we would be looking at less potentially volatile call types to send our program or crisis response team to. Now, there may be a particular situation in the future where we understand, if we can break that call type out, that certain calls have a co-response with a police officer and a social worker that follows up later to work with potentially the victim of that situation, but then connects the entire family to resources, but that would be after the initial response. But that's, again, something that we're still working through.
Sure. There's a lot of work to be done there. I can understand that. Thank you. Thank you,
You
Madam
good?
Chair. Yeah, good.
Councilwoman Hill? Need your mic.
It's red. My question is not about the crisis response team. It's about the staffing of the
Mhm.
police department. Are we good to move on to that? Are you okay? Are we?
Sure.
Okay,
go
I just
ahead.
want to make sure none of my colleagues had other questions about the response team. So in the plan as presented, you all are planning to cut 25 positions from the police department. And I understand that these are positions that historically you've been unable to fill. But we also are working on this pay plan, which hopefully would make things easier to fill. And I was concerned when I saw that the positions that are being pulled out of the budget are all listed as police officer. Because in District 2, we often have minimal officer coverage of our area because we don't have as much violent crime. But consequently, residents in District 2 are struggling with speeding cars, loud motorcycles, break-ins, nonviolent crimes. And so I need some help understanding why these are the ones that should be cut, not somewhere else in another department or a more administrative position.
So overall, I would say, the budget of 500 has not, that was done, I think 7 years ago. Could have been 6, but I think it was 7. We've never hit the budget of 500 sworn positions. We've gotten close a couple of times, but then that's just until retirements kick in. We've averaged over the past 5 years, just under that 475 mark or right around 475. Also, we'll still be above the recommended benchmark for ratio of police officers per population, which we're well above now, and we will continue to be above that. I do, and we can ask Chief Tucker to speak if he wants to speak about, any ideas around managing the staff and how we, move patrol officers around, that sort of thing. I think the big thing is we need to get to 475 and stay at 475. We just have kept dropping over the past couple of years. So yes, I do think pay will help us recruit more officers. I think it will help us retain more officers, but we still have a ways to go to get up to 475 and sustain at 475. We still have to add academies. We have to get through that process of the academy. We have to replace retirements. So our number one goal for the police department staffing is to get to 475, stay at 475. If we need to evaluate that in a future year, because the police department thinks that we need additional staffing, then we will certainly look at that. But do you want to say anything about coverage or how, once if we have a full staff of 475, how that would help with coverage?
Well, just to Brent's point, right now I think we're at 424. We've just graduated 23 out of the academy. As he said, we've had a very difficult time with hiring and retention. So I think we got to shore up our pay and everything else, which is part of this. If we can do that, if we have 475, we would be in pretty good shape. We were budgeted for 500, but if we can't increase that pay and keep it at 500, then we're going to constantly be at, in the low 400s, which will just, I think it will hurt us with the quality of candidate we can hire. And like I said, the commitment to stay over the years.
So the people of District 2 have seen significant increases in the valuation of their homes. And if we move forward with this budget, we'll bear a heavy load in the investment.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to know that the people of District 2 are going to see a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing you say is y'all are down about 50 officers from that 475 number at any given time. And that if we get to 475, that we are going to have ample coverage for all districts, including the Adam North sector?
Well, again, our manpower is based off who stays and who goes, off retirements, off resignations. What we feel is this pay increase will help us attract candidates to the profession. Will give us the opportunity to have a robust recruiting opportunity. And that allows us manpower for specific tasks, such as neighborhood policing.
I'll add one thing. The other thing, I mean, just to go back to Joda's point earlier, by implementing an alternative or a crisis response model, we would also be diverting a lot of calls eventually that are very time consuming calls. Like, some of these calls that involve mental health issues could take an officer out of service for an extended period of time. And we have those more and more often throughout the city. So I do think it's also worth the consideration that, as long as we're able to attract social workers, bring people in, implement this crisis response model, that will also free up time for police officers to do more neighborhood policing, community policing. And also, I think the fundamental difference of being at 475 and staying at 475 on a rolling basis is huge difference from where we are today. I mean, those additional 40, 50 police officers that are always out there will make a huge difference for the city. And again, we'll be, at that point, we will stay over the benchmark for how many officers we should have patrolling based on our size city and the level of crime that occurs.
You good, Councilwoman?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just saw it. No, go ahead.
What's the age limit? Age limit going out, like what's the age? How
Has to be under 40. You have to be under 40.
you have to be
Start. And
under
that's
40?
because of mandatory retirement age of 65.
You have to be under 40.
Yeah.
And in order to be officer, you have to at least be 21,
Yes.
at least 20.
Or turn 21.
That kind of makes the numbers even shorter of recruiters, people too. Okay, thank you.
Councilman, we've actually we've talked a little bit about, if there's any merit in changing the age, not the minimum age, but the 40-year-old age.
Mhm.
The issue with that is we do have mandatory retirement of 65 because
Gotcha.
we don't want, whether it's fire department or whichever one, we don't want older folks out, trying to climb on and off of trucks and everything else. It creates a lot of issues.
Right.
And we did have that issue in the past. And so these policies were put into place to make sure to mitigate a lot of the costs associated with injury on duty, some of the safety issues that it causes. And the other thing is you have to be in the pension 25 years to be fully vested. So that is what basically gets you to that 40-year-old mark.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank
You good?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Chief, this chief, you're good. That pretty much ends the council concerns for the topics that were for day one. Are you prepared to go forward? Is your staff prepared to go forward?
Yes, ma'am. We're ready to do whatever you would like us to do.
The next area, we're going into the departments, and the next area is Public Works. The two areas that were brought to the fore are LDO relative to enforcement, and Councilman Hester brought forward paving and sidewalks. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Councilman.
Thank you, Chairwoman Burse. One of the biggest questions we have as far as Public Works in the budget, all we've heard for sure that the solid waste drivers' salaries are increasing to $45K. nothing been said about the other departments and their CDL drivers so far. So we need some clarification of this 45K starting salary. Is that only for solid waste drivers?
We're currently looking at that for solid waste drivers. We will evaluate the other positions that are not specifically sanitation. The way we're looking at these is by job classification. We have a major shortage in the sanitation division for CDL drivers. If any of the people in the other departments would like to transfer to sanitation, we are hiring. And we are offering those positions to anyone that's qualified to drive those trucks. But yes, we will look at all classifications to see if we need further market adjustments in order to recruit and retain individuals.
Okay, that I think with the, let's call it a dilemma. A lot of the guys with CDLs are rushing to go to the waste, becoming waste drivers, and they're going to drop their other jobs with the city to go that direction. So we definitely need to address that.
Yeah, and we are increasing our recruiting efforts. And again, the pay will help that. And again, we will look at all job classifications that need further market adjustments. That was part of the pay plan implementation that we explained to, when we did the presentation, that we will continue looking at individual job classifications that need market adjustment in order to be, just competitive with the market. Starting pay of 45,000 for a sanitation truck driver, whether it's garbage, recycling, or even the brush truck drivers, that is still not near market. I mean, market rate is 65,000 starting out for a commercial truck driver with about a $12,000 bonus on top of that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to use taxpayer money the best way we possibly can to get as competitive as we can, while also providing excellent benefits, great pension, great health care, the ability for a truck driver to stay home at night instead of be over the road for 25 out of 30 days. So I do think that we have some benefits that we can use to recruit people into these positions. The biggest issue we've had for the past several years is the pay was just so low. They couldn't accept those benefits for the pay that we had. And I think that this will get us closer to where we need to be. And to the extent that, and sanitation drivers are just harder to recruit than other CDL drivers. I mean, it's a different job. Some people, just don't have any interest in driving a garbage truck, for example, but it is one of the most important positions we have in the city. As you all know, you get lots of calls if garbage does not get collected and sent to the landfill. So we will continue to work throughout all of the public works positions, or not just public works, any of the departments that require certain positions that we have a hard time recruiting or retaining.
Also, a few weeks ago, you gave your presentation regarding the our streets and our roads as far as payment. And I've been bombarded with calls concerning that. They said, is that really enough money, sufficient amount that's going to be allocated to fix the roads in the city of Chattanooga? And we pretty much every other street you see, there's a pothole. And they're saying that we can't just patch up this thing. There's got to be some real work done. So if not, we're going to continue to have the same problem over and over again. So how are we going to address that as far as the budget? But do you believe that's enough monies in the budget that's going to be allocated to at least make our streets drivable?
So yes and no. So as we presented a few weeks ago to council, we did determine that the average or the cost that we need to put in the budget every year for paving to stay where we are and start creeping up just a little bit it's just under $10 million a year, 9.9 million, I believe. So we thought it was very critical that we put at least $10 million in the budget, and our plan is to do 10 million every year for 4 years. So it'd be $40 million over 4 years, and really start paving roads smarter versus harder, like try to consolidate areas, make sure that we're working with neighboring municipalities in the county to combine, just like we did in Chairman, I think that's Chairman Henderson's district, Morrison Springs Road, is that yours?
Yeah.
Red Bank was paving most of that road because it's in the city of Red Bank. But we had them continue paving past the city line to get the city portion of that road as well. So we want to do a lot more of that so we can get more bang for our buck. And, I think $10 million a year is sufficient to, put us back on the upswing. I think, we could always increase the paving budget, but that means we have to choose to cut funding from somewhere else. And we would be open to looking at capital projects that the council might want to move funding to paving rather than something in the capital budget. What the capital budget we've presented overall, we feel like is a good capital budget that, stretches the limited dollars out among all the different things that we need to do as a city. But every budget is a series of choices. And if we want to, as a group, as a council, decide to move increase funding for paving, it would need to be decreased from somewhere else in the budget. I will say this too about potholes, for example. So the budget includes a full-time pothole inspector. And while that sounds great, it's a good sound bite, and some people think it's cheesy, right? It's really important because right now what happens is, people call in potholes to 311 and they say there's a pothole in this road, and, it creates a service request, and we eventually send a pothole repair truck out there to find that there's no pothole, right? It's some other issue. It's either maybe there's rippling in the road, maybe it's actually starting to be part of a road-based failure, or it's something other than a pothole that needs to be repaired. If we have someone that can go out and verify potholes as they're called in, make sure it's a pothole, spray paint it, get the truck out there. The truck can actually fill more potholes, be more efficient throughout the city. But this person will also proactively drive the streets to look for issues that can be repaired, because the sooner we repair potholes, the longer the street will last, right? So one issue is if we, and there's areas of town where we get 0 calls for potholes, but there's 40, 50 potholes. And because we don't have someone fully dedicated to monitoring the streets, looking for these types of issues, we don't make it out to those areas unless we get a call from someone. So this will fundamentally change just by having one person dedicated to this. It'll fundamentally change how we tackle like minor repairs to prevent the roads from becoming much bigger issues down the road. So I think that combined with a smart paving plan over the next 4 years will get us to start increasing, instead of just staying, we want to at least stay where we are. We don't want to get worse, right? But we also want to start going up versus the trajectory we've had for the past 7 or so years.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank
Are
you.
you good, or can I move on? All right, Councilman Henderson.
Chief, staying with paving for just a minute. We've talked in years past about developing an asset management plan. I think that'll probably give us a little bit better guidance about how much money we really need to be spending on paving. Where are we at developing or having a final product on that?
So we have a draft that we, from the consultants, that we made some adjustments to. Once Mayor Kelly was elected and we came into office, we took a look at that. We made some suggestions, some comments. The point right now is that we just need to have the consultant finalize the transportation asset management plan so that we can present that to council, which we expect to be able to do in a few weeks. I'll have to ask Ben or Blythe the exact time and let you know. But I mean, we definitely expect to do that, in the next few weeks. And then also we are finalizing the development of a 4-year paving plan that kind of goes in conjunction with the asset management plan. And we would like to meet with each of the council members to go through that as well, to make sure that, to show you what we're seeing in terms of, we think we can get more out of our dollar by paving these roads in your district for fiscal year 22, 23, 24, 25, right? Based on condition, based on where they're located, and see if we need to tweak those or carry on as we prepared.
So that was a perfect segue into my next question, which had to do with come back here. I'm not through.
I had to get some water.
It's one thing to tell constituents, we're going to have $10 million in budget. I mean, in paving. that doesn't really tell them if their road is going to get paved. So I guess my question is, will that plan be far enough along by the time we vote on this budget that we could maybe convey to our constituents, hey, this is included in this new budget?
Yes, I think by next Tuesday, we could provide you a preliminary listing for fiscal year 22 and 23, which are the 2 years included in the current bid for paving.
Okay.
That way you can get a really good idea. I mean, it's preliminary, but it's probably not going to change a whole lot unless you all decide you want to change it. But we can provide that by next Tuesday.
Okay.
To show
That's-
what the list looks like for fiscal years 22 and 23.
Good, thank you.
So,
Anyth- I'm sorry.
Councilman, then we'll kick off next week with the list.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right.
That sounds
And
good.
you had something else, I think.
Well, the asset management plan. You
Go
talk,
ahead.
but I think they're still developing that. So,
Okay.
I mean, that may be after budget,
Okay.
but I do have one more
Go
question,
ahead.
if I may. Hey, Chief, anything that you could share with us in relation to curbside recycling? I mean, has our efforts of raising pay produced any results at this point in time to know
Yes.
when we might be able to start that back up?
Yeah, we announced that our plan, if we can fill enough drivers, is to resume curbside recycling on October 1st. So a few things I'll mention about that. One, we have seen a lot of increased interest and chatter about the position, obviously, with the change in pay announced. There's still always going to be a little hesitation until it's a done deal, right? Because the caveat on the job announcement is that it's pending budget approval, but we are seeing an increase in interest. We've been contacted by several firms that want to offer assistance with recruiting truck drivers and those sorts of things. So we're having those conversations. I know that Shay Jefferson in HR has talked to Miller Mott, for example, and they're starting to help refer people from their truck driving school over to us. So we've made a lot of progress on recruiting efforts, and the word is out there. I think a lot of people are kind of in a waiting period to see if it actually happens or not. But yes, we are making progress. The other thing on recycling, we are convening some internal meetings with the mayor and Public Works, and also some external meetings with partners like the Recycling Partnership. Coca-Cola is interested because they're a supporter of the Recycling Partnership, and they have a commitment to using recycled materials in their bottles. So these are all scheduled meetings that we've started to have because we really need to take a fresh look at our entire recycling approach. There's several types of things that get put into single stream recycling that are simply just not recyclable anymore. They used to be. For example, plastics 3 through 7 that's why the recycle centers don't accept those, because they're just going to the landfill. There's nowhere to take these materials. The China used to buy a lot of recycled materials, and that market has collapsed quite a bit as they've increased quality standards for what sort of materials that they want. Transportation costs becomes a big issue for sending certain materials from this part of town or this part of the country to, say, California, where they might be able to use these recycled materials. So we really need to take a fresh look at our entire recycling program. Make it clear to the public what types of materials will be recyclable if they put them in the blue can, and be clear to the public that if they put other things in the blue can, that everything in that can goes to landfill. And we really just need to be a lot more intentional about our communication around recycling and what we do, so that we get cleaner single stream, so that our fees go down. I mean, another issue we have is fees are going up at the processor, and part of that's because the contamination rate is so high. So, we have lots of different issues to work on with recycling, but we have started those conversations, and that's the dual approach with just fundamental problems with recycling, combined with bringing more truck drivers into the city that can drive the trucks.
Thank you, sir.
You good, Councilman? Okay, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, going back a few minutes ago, we were talking about the competitive pay, but you were also talking about the benefits package and using that as a marketing tool for attraction. I'm just want to say thank you for realizing the value in our benefits package. When we were with the consultant on the pay study, I was very distraught when I heard that that component was completely left out of the study. And that is a vital part of working anywhere, is the benefits package. And the fact that I felt like the previous administration was kind of glossing over that in that pay study and not using it to its full benefit was a disservice to the positions and helping market. So I appreciate what I'm hearing is recognizing the value in what we offer as far as our benefits.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And that is, we will continue to communicate more about total compensation and how important that is. Because it is a little bit harder with the younger generation to convince people to look at things like a pension and disability insurance and all those sorts of things, medical insurance. But we are going to be very intentional about how we communicate around total compensation for any job in the city, because it's important to realize that, one, it's a significant cost to taxpayers. Two, it's a really important part of our compensation strategy throughout the city.
One of the ideas I had brought up with human resources at that time was to get with our insurance company and providing maybe even an alternative package of a lesser benefits package, if you will, with a higher pay structure for those folks in that age group that find certain value in whatever they want to find certain value in. And for, someone with a full family on an insurance package, or someone who's single, and Blue Cross seemed to think, or HR seemed to think, that they could go back and talk about that with our healthcare provider. But, that was a while back, and here we are today. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You good?
Yes, I'm good. I had to get that off my.
I'm glad you got that off your chest. It's something you've spoken about a lot. Thank you. Under the Public Works, before we move on to Parks and Outdoors, there was the issue that was brought up about LDO and enforcement. And Chair Henderson, I believe you asked for us to put forward concerns across the board we had about enforcement. Would you rather handle that then, or do you want to go further with the LDO enforcement discussion now?
I think we need to have a matter of budget. I think those discussions. More money.
Okay, agreed. I just wanted to make sure you were on board with that. So one of the things that came up in our discussion in strategic planning was there seems to be a lack of enforcement relative to ordinances we bring up that deal mainly with what we call quality of life issues. And I guess the question, and the chair put it correctly, do we have the funding to do the enforcement where we won't keep getting the response, we don't have enough staff?
Yeah, so I think a couple ways to look at this. I mean, one, it depends on which type of enforcement and whether it's an actual LDO function or a neighborhood code enforcement function. And I think making sure that we clearly define what those two things are will go a long way. For starting with the LDO side of things. So with LDO, moving LDO back into Public Works, I think will, once we get everything settled and everything fully transitioned, I think that'll create a lot of efficiencies around, some of the issues we've had over the years with permitting and, the time it takes to do certain things. I think putting everything mostly back into the same place will help with that. A lot of the processes that we've heard complaints about over the years. When it comes to neighborhood code enforcement, whether it's, abandoned vehicles or garbage or tall grass or stuff on buildings, blight, as we used to say all the time, not blight, but blight. All those things, vandalism, we need to really take a look at how we're doing it now and work with that team under community development. So the neighborhood codes enforcement will be in community development and work with neighborhood services, work with the community centers. We want to be much more intentional about how they all work with each other and try to be a little more proactive. Julia might have more to add, but she and Tony have already had discussions, Tony Salmons, about how we can start working on some of these things and be a little more proactive in what we do with enforcement rather than only react to the complaints. The other thing we need to do, as discussed in the strategic planning session, is we do need to see a list from the council members of all the types of complaints that you get, what types of enforcement you want us to look at in particular. I think we agreed that that would happen by the end of this month. I can't remember now. And we would take that list, spend some time to evaluate what the issues are, tell you what our needs are, tell you what changes we might recommend to ordinances to help have better enforcement and those sorts of things. So I do think for this budget year that we have sufficient budget in place to start moving forward. I think some of this is policy driven. I think some of it's process driven. And I think some of it is, possibly issues with codes or ordinances that we just need to adjust because things have changed over time. And that would help us with enforcement. I think that would give us a level set moment to be able to go into the budget season, next budget season, which is right around the corner. Since, we're later into the year than normal, and really see if we do need to make budget adjustments. But I really don't think that those would be necessary based on what we've got presented to you in the budget now.
With LDO, and we're going to be talking about the community enforcement under Councilwoman Dotley's presentation. However, this had to do literally with zoning and things happening out of zone or not being enforced. The big one, as I remember, was short-term vacation rentals, which 4 districts clearly said they didn't want. And they're all over the place. And I think we need to respect that and how we go about doing that. So that will be on the list, I know.
Yes,
So
ma'am. Yeah.
even with that, you think there is sufficient funding?
I do. There's a couple of things in process right now, like the zoning codes assessment is, the first draft's been completed. It's been reviewed by the mayor. We've got some comments to provide back to the consultant that did the assessment. And then, we'll be able to start bringing that to you for you all to see as a final, draft. And I think it's going to create a lot of really good changes in our zoning codes. From what we've seen, it simplifies the codes, makes things more enforceable, makes things more understandable for the public, for council, for the administration, for the people who are responsible for the enforcement. So I think that's a great first step because it puts us in a much better position, for a foundation. I think for things like short-term vacation rental, I think we definitely, we know that's going to be on the list from council members of something that we need to look at. I think we've already started these conversations internally, and I think we really need to sit down and look at the ordinance as it's written, look at the issues that we've had, and come back to council with a recommended plan of action. And I don't think that's going to necessarily cost money that we need to add to the budget. If it costs anything, I think it would be minimal enough to where we could absorb it somehow through the budget. But I think that is all a matter of process of really hearing what the council is saying to us, taking the time to review, create an action plan, and come back to you with how to fix it.
Thank you. Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Chief, I guess before, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I think it does need to be addressed and probably more of a long-term solution maybe than short. I think immediately though, thinking about to the software that I guess got eliminated. I'm not sure that identifies websites for short-term vacation rentals that do not have a permit number. Is that something that we can implement this budget cycle?
I think I see Dallas over there. Dallas, do you want to speak to that at all?
Because I think that is something that we need to address sooner rather than later.
Yes, sir. We'll be happy to look at getting software back in place. As stated before, we weren't getting much out of the ones. The last case they sent us to try to enforce was an envelope full of blank pages. And their comment to us was, oh, I guess our printer ran out of ink. I mean, so that's what they sent us. That's what we were getting. That's the service we were getting.
So
We started
you're-
looking at new companies and we kept finding this company was buying them all out. We have done some more research and we found 2 companies that do this. But my IT guys are telling me that there's these companies that do short-term vacation rentals are going for legislation where you can't just come scrub all their data. Now, I don't know whether that's going, but we can do that. But yes, we were spending $43,000 a year for nothing. Now, as we've also found out, we looked at internally, what can we do? Why don't we look, since Airbnb collects money for taxes, why don't we look at all the places we're getting tax money from? And then we can start with those. I mean, should be a good long list, other than we find out that they just send us taxes and they do not tell us what address they're being collected from. So, plan B, how do we even know we're getting the money that's being collected? That's just in the back of my mind. But yes, sir. I mean, we've identified a couple of companies and, we can move forward with that.
So there is money in. your
Well, we have a
budget.
technology fund. The contractors pay in when they buy permits. And we do track short-term vacation rental with that. But, there have been concerns voiced from the development community. Why are we buying short-term vacation rental with a fund we agreed to set up and have separate to support monies for software for the development community so we can do permitting online and stuff like that. So those are probably, I don't know if conversations you guys have had with them. But yeah, we spent about 150,000 for our permitting software, all our inspection software. And we were spending 43,000 just to get a list of addresses that may have short-term vacation rentals. And as stated before, most of them just go and change their time to 30 days. So they're no longer short-term vacation rentals. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we face and how to chase these things. So, but we were not getting some of the case building they were supposed to help us do. We were not getting. So we, as part of the renewal process, are we getting our money's worth? No, we did not think we were.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, perfect. Thank
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I'll add to that is, I think we really need to take a hard look at short-term vacation rental and determine what our best possible solutions are for all the issues that have come up. To the extent that we need to purchase, if there is some software out there that would be helpful and it's, similar in cost to what we had before, like $40,000 or $50,000, we do have components of the budget for repairs and renewals, R&R, restoration, those sorts of things. So we can make that work, but the last thing I want to do is go buy more software that doesn't talk to any other software and that doesn't work. So I do think that we need to, I understand the need for a short-term and long-term solution. So I think we could pretty quickly come up with some short-term ideas that would be helpful, but really with an eye toward long-term.
The only other thing that I would bring up as well is and probably not everybody on this council has this problem, but I know that I do and Councilwoman Hill would. is stormwater. And maybe Vice Chair Smith, but stormwater violations continue to be a big problem in my district, I'm sure in Councilwoman Hill's district. My question there would be, do we have the money to have the enforcement availability to address these, not just on they really shouldn't have to be complaint driven. I would think that we would want to be out in front of this before there's a problem, but which would include site visits. I understand that's, probably some staff that we don't have. But rather than these poor citizens having to call their council person or call stormwater and beg and plead for somebody to come, stop the mud from running down their driveway, I think we need to address this problem sooner than later as well.
Councilman, I agree as well. We do somewhere, each inspector does between 150 and 200 site visits in between complaints. So we're tasked to go by the state requirements to look at these sites. We have been playing ever since Tony left. We've been a person short and trying to get staff back up. So we should be.
We just
in our
haven't
last-
found anybody, or
We haven't found, but like I said, we promoted some people, moved some stuff around, and we should be in hiring our last person to go back in. But we do visit the sites, and there are documents that the contractors are required to turn in as well, where they're doing site assessments themselves, kind of a self-inspection. They turn in and we look at that book to make sure they've done those, and we will write notices of violation on those as well. But then we do have some outstanding, $20, $30, $40,000 fines that until somebody really gets forced to
Well, now-
pay,
So is my understanding that we can take these people before the stormwater board, and there's some steps that can begin to happen. We addressed that in an ordinance, not probably 2 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer, but I would have thought those actions we would be able to start putting in place to start collecting some of these fees. As in you begin to lose your ability to pull a permit.
we have discussed that as well. But I would imagine there's probably not a day goes by that somebody gets a notice of violation that doesn't have some amount of fine. And I know, if you know how those work, they get graduated. You get a $500 one, you get 7 days to fix it, and you get a $1,000 one, and they keep escalating. Usually they take care of the right away. Most do, but sometimes they don't. We do have rain events. Sometimes it's hard. We don't know that a erosion control is going to fail until we have a rain like we've had, the last 2 nights. And, but we get out there. There are minimums, but when we find out whatever the minimum is doesn't work, we require additional things to be put in place to try to stop the erosion. So, I think we do a lot of site visits. I think we're working pretty hard. We're
So
about to get stopped.
I guess the question though becomes, do you feel like you have the money in your budget to provide adequate staff once that staff is filled in order to be proactive?
Right now, as wide open as it is, we could always use more staff. I mean, I don't know if you know the construction, we're issuing as many permits as we ever have.
Yeah.
And so there's as many construction projects going on as we ever have as well. Look at the new landscaping. We never have anybody, the new landscaping requirement for the steeper slopes. We still don't have anybody to kind of work that side of land disturbing activity. But
We don't have the money, or we just don't have the person.
we've never had, we've never been given the money to hire a person to work that. And I will say this, we did get an additional zoning inspector a couple of years ago, but then we also got short-term vacation rentals. So we've got somebody works that 95% of their time is spent on short-term vacation rental. So,
Thank you, Doc.
yes, sir.
Is this something that you would like to return to next week?
I think we need to come back and readdress that issue.
All right. Yeah,
Especially hearing that we
let's,
don't have money for a position in an ordinance that we've passed. That comes along with enforcement.
All right. So we're defining the agenda for next week, and I've just put that on it.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of along the lines, Chairman Henderson, our good intentions with passing laws that address issues, if they're not enforceable and we do not have the personnel, I think that should be question number one before we pass any future laws. Because they are simply on paper with absolutely no benefit, impact, or return on investment for any of our citizens. And therefore that effort is futile. So let's consider that as part of the component for any new legislation moving forward. If we can't enforce it, let's not do it. Number two is I'm meeting with developers weekly, wanting to come and develop residential housing in District 4. It concerns me that when we talk about stormwater regulations and when we have these rainwater events, that we don't have the people power. And that's something that I think we've talked about before in LDO. And I just want to stress the importance that is we are growing our economy, growing our housing opportunities, that we have the people power to ensure quality development and that our rules are being followed. And if that's something we need to address coming out of LDO to give them the tools that they need, then please let this be very mindful as we move forward with a growing city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. One of the things we've spoken about in the past, and is a good practice in other places, is whenever we pass an ordinance, part of it is the discussion of enforcement and making sure it can be enforced. So good point. I've made a note of that as well. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, to that point, the Tennessee legislature, every bill has a fiscal note attached to it where the research has really been done to know what it's going to take to actually make that law come to life. And so enforcement being linked directly to finances, we're seeing that again and again. And so I think that's something we should definitely consider as part of our legislative committee. It is highly concerning to me that this body has passed ordinances related to, for example, holding a permit, and that our department is thinking about that, but are holding the ability to pull a permit if you have fines in our, sounds to me like we're thinking about enforcing that, but not enforcing that. That really makes me very concerned. The homeowners in my district are impacted directly by this every single day and worry a great deal when it rains. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, I was just gonna, Councilwoman Hill, what you said in the very beginning there, I was like, you're reading my mind. I was just gonna say, we are happy at the council's request for any ordinance to provide a brief on, some sort of briefing about what our plan would be to do enforcement, for example, what it might cost if there's, additional financial consequences, those sorts of things. And I think that's important because I think it helps us, do it correctly the first time versus having to revisit later and figure out how to change it or find more money or find more people. I think that would be a really good way to look at ordinances that require any type of enforcement.
It speaks to our how beneficial it would be if we as a council had a legislative agenda for the year that was tied to our strategic plan and the work we do on the budget. Because then we know we're working in advance of the budget to then deliver the enforcement for that when the time comes.
Anything else, Councilwoman? Brent, one of the things that you mentioned when we studied at length the stormwater and the short-term vacation rentals, if you will read those, you will see that we talked about enforcement. We talked about who would be doing the enforcement. We covered all of that because they were such hot topics. So I'm building next week's agenda, and so far I have on a deeper discussion of pavement listing, and under LDO enforcement, short-term vacation rentals, and storm water. I can't fault my colleagues because we honestly put all those things in the law. We didn't think it was up to administration to decide whether or not they wanted to do it. And certainly if we quit the computer program and we really kind of weren't enforcing because we really kind of couldn't do it, then somebody should have let us know. So I've got that on next week's agenda. Colleagues, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break. I want to do one more thing because there's only one issue. And that is under Parks and Outdoors, which again is Councilman Hester. We only had one issue. Councilwoman Dotley was talking about green infrastructure. And I thought you might want to elaborate on what you meant there or what your issue was.
I just had questions about, what are the plans for green infrastructure? I know we have like the Alton Park connector and other, investing in the Riverwalk, but are there other plans for green infrastructure throughout the city?
So, yeah, thank you for the question. Overall, part of the reason why we thought it was important to create a Department of Parks and Outdoors is to really, again, it's about intentionality, putting a lot of things together that previously were spread out, like parks maintenance, parks programming, design and connectivity, which, as you all know, Blythe Bailey's moved into that position in Parks and Outdoors to be over the design and connectivity piece, which is really about the infrastructure related to greenways and designing how we connect neighborhoods together, whether it's sidewalks, greenways, passive parks, whatever that is. So bringing all those functions together in one department, as well as outdoor Chattanooga, outdoor recreation, all the things that we do outdoors to really use all of our outdoor assets, but also to really have we have the master parks planning that's happening right now. And then we also have a list of all kinds of greenway connections that have been requested. Alton Park connector is a good example. Midtown Pathway is also a good example, even though it's not as green, some of it is less green, but it's still about connectivity and connecting greenways to each other. So I think you'll see by having the assets in place for this budget for Parks and Outdoors and creating, and these are new positions that we created specifically because of our focus on green infrastructure, connectivity, and those sorts of things. So that'll all come about as we finish the parks master planning and really think about how to connect all these areas across town.
Okay, thank you.
Are you good, Councilwoman? Okay, Councilman Byrd. Not yet. Now you are.
Okay. Back to, it was kind of earlier with Mr. Dallas. I thought I heard him say we had like $30,000 on the books of like fines of people that didn't pay. I remember in the last administration, we had this conversation and like Ms. Hill was saying about enforcing and getting it going. It's sad that we having a conversation, but nothing has been implemented. And I think that's the issue too, because if we got $30,000 sitting on the books that people owe, and these companies are steadily just doing business as normal, when do we as this council say, hey, city attorney, can we go ahead and create the legislation or create the line to say, hey, this is where the buck stop. You can't do work anymore in our city, and go ahead and put that in place to go ahead and, you know, fix the situation. It's like, we talked about this, I know, probably 2 years ago, and we're still talking about it 2 years later. So as this body, can we say that now? Like, hey, let's see some legislation in a week or two, or, you know, before this budget is up, anything to just say, let's go ahead and stop it, because it's just doing business as normal in Chattanooga. You get slapped on the wrist, nobody say anything to you. We have to start making those hard decisions now, you know?
Councilman, we can do anything legislatively we want.
Mm-hmm.
We can bring it up. And I think you're saying maybe at the next strategic planning meeting, you do want to bring it up
Of course.
and it'll follow a process.
Man, this is
Yeah,
crazy.
how about that?
Okay, I love it. Let's get
Okay.
it. Thank you.
All right. Councilman Hester, is there anything else before we break? Thank you very much. So to my colleagues, thank you very, very much. We've gotten through a lot. We're going to take a break till quarter of, and then get back to work again. And we will go with city planning. We will not do economic development since Councilwoman Kudron isn't here. Councilwoman Dotley will go ahead and start with community equity and community engagement. All right. Okay, let's break until quarter till a little over about 35 minutes. Thank you.